Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Catherine McKenzie joining me. Hi Catherine.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. Some of you might remember we've had Catherine on before, and also Catherine's an associated author of Global Girls Online Book Club, so great to be talking to you again.
Thank you for having me again.
So, a little bit about Catherine. Catherine was born and raised in Montreal, Canada. She's a graduate of McGill University in history and law, and she practiced law for 20 years before leaving to write full time. An avid runner, skier, and tennis player, she's an author of numerous bestsellers, and her latest novel is Have You Seen Her, which I can see there in the background. Yep, and you've
And
got
I have
your
a huge
copy.
poster, but also a physical copy.
Yeah, no, and I had my own copy, but I can't show it because it was on my Kindle.
No
Um,
worries.
and her works have been translated into multiple languages, and I'll Never Tell You and Please Join Us has been optioned for development into a television series. So thanks so much for joining us. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us about Have You Seen Her?
Sure. So, Have You Seen Her is about a woman named Cassie Peters who is leaving her life in New York behind for reasons that will eventually become clear,
Mm,
and returning to the Yosemite, California area to work as a search and rescue worker in Yosemite National Park. And she soon becomes involved in the disappearance of a couple that echoes the disappearance of a couple 10 years earlier that she was also involved in.
and I really love the setting. Is that a
Oh, thanks.
is it something like a setting that you're familiar with?
Yeah, my sister and brother-in-law worked search and rescue in Yosemite for 5 years,
Mm,
about 15 years ago. And I visited, I actually never visited when they were doing that, but during the pandemic, they moved back to the area. And so I've been there a bunch of times.
mm,
Um, and I thought it was just, I've always been interested in what that part of their life. And I always thought it was a good place to situate a story and a good
mm,
setting to situate a story, but I didn't have the right story,
mm,
as is often the case. And then one day the right story hit me. So
mm. And what came to you first when you first started writing this book?
it's always the premise for me. So I did get the premise of the book when Gabby Petito first disappeared in Grand Teton National Park.
Mm,
And this is not Gabby's story at all. But because I think I had already been thinking about setting a story in the search and rescue world, and I've actually spent quite a bit of time in Grand Teton as well. Um, that when that broke, and even before we knew what had happened to Gabby, the sort of idea for this book popped into my head, and I went from there.
mm. And when I read your intro, like mentioned you had been a lawyer for 20 years. What made, like, all that time had you been thinking about writing, and what made you decide now's the time to?
No, I mean, I was publishing and practicing for 10 years together.
Yeah.
So my first book came out in 2010 when I was still
Mm,
practicing law. And I started writing novels in 2006. And I always say, and I think it's kind of true that I wrote my first novel by accident,
mm,
which sounds insane, but I had an idea that wouldn't leave me alone, and I didn't know what it was. And one day I just started writing it down over the Christmas holidays in a Word document.
mm,
And it eventually turned into my first novel that lives in a drawer. And but while I was writing that book and kind of learning how to write a novel, I got an idea for a different book that I thought was sellable. And so I was like, okay, let's see if now that I've kind of figured out that I could write a book, let's see if
mm,
I can write a better book
mm,
that is sellable. And so I wrote that book and I got an agent with that book, and it did eventually sell.
mm. And how long did that process actually take?
Yeah, so that process, I think my agent was in the market for like 18 months. So I probably finished that book at the end of 2006, beginning of 2007, or sorry, in 2007. I guess I got my agent in October 2008. And then she sold actually another book that I wrote after that, called Spin, which is actually my first book that came out in July of 2009. So that was almost 2-year process after I had an agent before I sold my first book.
Okay. And what sort
Yeah.
of law were you practicing?
I did litigation.
Okay.
So civil and commercial litigation. No family law, no criminal. I did a lot of
So
class
not
actions
what you're
and
writing
civil
about.
rights work and employment law. Those are my
Okay.
3 areas.
Yeah. So not really what you've been writing about.
No, very different. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, writing for me was doing something different. I didn't want to write what I was doing, so.
And you've written a few different genres. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started out writing, well, I thought I was Nick Hornby. But back then they called it chick lit. Now they call it romantic comedies. And that's what I started writing. And I transitioned over my career to suspense and mystery and thrillers. And then, but this year I had 2 books out. So I went back and I wrote a rom-com called Hazel Fine Sings Along. And it was published under a pseudonym, Katie Wicks. And I have a second rom-com coming out next year called Chloe Baker's Lost Date.
Under the same pseudonym, is that
Yeah,
right?
under the same name. Yeah, under Katie Wicks.
Yep.
Yep.
And how do you go about writing the two? Because they are quite different. Do you?
They're quite different for sure. Yeah, and I mean, when I turned in the final version of my book to my, what happens when you get an editor is they buy your book and then the editorial letter where they tell you everything that's wrong in your book. And sometimes it feels like, well, why'd you buy this book if there's so many things wrong? But my editorial letter for Hazel was like, it read like one of my thrillers, like there was too much plot and it was like 2-page turny, which I never thought was a bad thing. But I got it. It was, I had to sort of like strip out some of the plot and add more emotion and romance to the book. So it is definitely different. I think, the central plot in a rom-com is the romance. And whereas even if I've written thrillers that have characters who have relationships, that's not the main part of the book, right? And so I think it's really spending more time in your emotions. And then like conversely, at the end of Have You Seen Her, for people who've read it, or if you do read it, maybe, I don't want to spoil anything, but the first version of the book had a much happier ending.
Oh, okay.
And I turned it in and my editor was like, I think your rom-coms have been influencing your thriller writing. Like this can't end like this. And I was like, oh no, you're right. I have to think of something a little more menacing. To end a thriller on. And so, but it's been fun. And my next project, which is coming out next year, is I think I'm actually marrying the two. So I'm writing a funny mystery series. It's my first series because all my other books have been standalone.
Yeah.
And it has romantic elements in it too. And so, and it's funny. And so it was nice to be able to like take the like serious mystery side and good plot and all that, and then put it together with something that was a little more lighthearted because like thrillers, I like reading them, obviously, and writing them, but it is a dark place that you're living in when you write it. And any book that you write, no matter how fast you write, but you're really living with that book for a couple of years. And so so it's like you're living in this dark place. You have to think of all these terrible things that people do to one another. So I'm happy to be lightening things up a little bit the next go round.
Yeah, well, that's what made me wonder. Like, do you write one book at like totally at a time, or are you thinking about a couple at the same?
No, I mean when I was doing those projects, or just even other things I've been doing screenwriting, I'll write one thing in the morning and then something different in the afternoon.
Okay.
And so there's only so much creative energy on any given project normally, I find, in a day. And so the way I figured out how to be more productive or to produce more material, not that I was ever unproductive, was to really just be like, not to try and push, oh, I'm going to write 5,000 words today. It's like, that's not really possible on one project. So yeah, I'll do one thing in the morning and then something else in the afternoon.
And are your books published by different publishers or all the same?
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah. So my thrillers up to now have been with Atria, Simon and Schuster, and then the rom-com actually is with Wattpad, has an imprint now where they're doing traditional publishing, but it's also on the Wattpad platform, which is a self-publishing platform, and that's been actually a fun experience to interact with readers in a very different way. And I have to say they're very welcoming and friendly community with like, there's no star ratings. There's no like unlike button. You can just give something a star or leave a comment, but you can't like, I mean, I guess people could write nasty comments, but in general they don't tend to. And so it's a really kind of a positive environment, which is, you know, after Amazon and Goodreads and whatever.
It's where
nice.
people,
people just, and again, I know they're not writing for me, but you know, people can be quite harsh sometimes on those platforms. So yeah.
And your series you mentioned, what name will we find that under?
So the first book is called Every Time I Go on Vacation, Someone Dies.
Okay. That sounds like it will be a very good read, it sounds like.
Yeah. I'm super excited about it. I'm actually writing book 2 in the series now. And today
and is
I
that
just
under Catherine McKenzie or under your pseudonym?
That's to be discussed at a later date.
But, really?
Yeah. We can't break any news on this post, but
you'll have to let us know.
I will let everybody know soon.
So when do you expect them to be out, your first one to be out?
That it's coming out April 30th of next year.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the UK, May 2nd, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if I have a Australia, New Zealand pub date yet. Usually I think it follows the UK date. So
okay. No, I'll certainly be looking out for that. And could you share with us what you like reading yourself, and if there might have been something you've read lately you could recommend? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I read eclectically, honestly. I mean, I read a lot of thrillers, obviously, a lot of the time because I'm asked to read, to give, you know, these nice quotes that are on the cover, right? And so I have to do my part too and read other people's work, which I'm of course happy to do. But I like reading rom-coms. I like reading mysteries. Sometimes I like reading speculative fiction. Like I really enjoyed the Addie LaRue book, or 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And what I'm recommending right now is coming out on July 11th, so on Tuesday, and it's called Forever Hold Your Peace. And it's by Liz Fenton and Lisa Steinke, who write together and have written many books together. And it's a fun story about a couple whose daughter comes back from a trip to Greece and announces that she's met the love of her life and is getting married very quickly. But it turns out that her groom-to-be's parents are not unknown to this couple. And so the drama starts from there.
Yeah. Sounds interesting. I'll have to
look
that one up. And could you tell us, like, growing up, had you always wanted to be a writer? Did you write stories yourself?
It wasn't ever something I thought about doing for a career at all. I always wrote poetry. Growing up. And so I guess I just was a writer without thinking about being a writer. But I didn't think I really had an imagination. I never wrote short stories. And then in my 20s, a couple of times, I would read a book that I really loved. And then I'd be like, I'm going to write something like this. And I sat down and started writing some stupid copy of the book that I literally just put down. And like after 10 pages, it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is ridiculous. And I don't even have those. They're on some like long ago forgotten computer, you know? And so no, it never was a plan, but I guess it was actually my dad's retirement plan was that he was going to write detective fiction. And he went about, like, he took writing classes and all this stuff, and he did eventually write a couple. And so I guess it was something that, like, it was there in the environment around me of something that people could do.
Yeah.
Even I didn't know anyone in publishing or anything like that, but this idea that was like, oh yeah, you could write a book, you know.
Mm.
I always loved reading. I was a huge reader. I learned to read very young, and I was always a huge reader and storyteller. I think if you talk to my friends, they would say that long before I wrote a novel, that I was like, I love telling stories in parties. You know, like I'd have these 20-minute stories about something that happened to me or whatever. And so I think I definitely had that storyteller aspect for a long time.
And when you write, do you have a favorite place to write?
I honestly will write anywhere,
Yeah.
but and I learned to write anywhere because when I was practicing law, I didn't have the luxury of being like, I have to be in my special room with my special tools to.
Yeah.
But I really like writing in the sun. Like my favorite place to write is around a pool or on a beach somewhere. Um, but I also like writing on airplanes because there's no distractions. Um, I write many different places, honestly. Right now I'm writing at my tennis club.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
I go play tennis, and this is why I'm tan or sunburned, whatever way. But yeah, I go play tennis, and then I
And
write
then
in
you do your
between
writing.
tennis matches. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And you have been writing for a while now, and I'm sure
Mhm.
you have had contacts with lots of readers. Is there
Mhm.
anything you might like to share with us that maybe a reader said to you that maybe surprised you or touched you?
I think honestly, anytime a reader takes time to like write me an email to say that they've enjoyed reading my book and
Mm,
why.
mm,
Um, it's always touching. I do always respond to those emails. And I think that even for readers that are huge, like no one's gonna be like, oh, sorry, don't tell me you liked my book, you know? But I did in the last year I've had interaction with this woman who's like 90 years old who somehow discovered one of my books in the library or something and has now read literally every book that I've written.
Oh, really?
And she writes me these lovely emails.
Yeah.
Um, like I think she hadn't read anything in a really long time, and she
Mm,
just suddenly started reading my books. And so, like that's super touching to feel like
mm,
you've had an impact in someone's life.
yeah.
Because there are for sure books that I felt that way about
Mm,
growing up, and I think in general, what I'm always hoping is that feeling I had when I was a kid, when I could get like lost in a book and nothing could distract me, and you could talk to me and I wouldn't even hear you, and like if I can make anyone feel like that when they're reading one of my books, then
mm,
I've done my job, and
mm,
that's
mm,
that's like yeah, that's
yeah.
that's a good thing. And if you have bad things to say, that's fine, but you don't need to write me and tell me.
Yeah. Exactly. And you have lots and lots of different characters and lots of different genres that your characters come
Right.
from. If you could be a character from one of your books for a day, who would you choose and why?
Oh, no one's ever asked me that question before. Everyone's always
Oh.
like assumes I am the characters in my books. So that's so interesting. Oh my God. That's a toughie. Who would I want to be? I don't know. I mean, if I talk about have you seen her, I would say that Petal was
Mm,
super fun to write because she just says like she has no filter or she just says whatever's on her mind. And
yeah.
so it was fun to inhabit that.
Mm,
And it would be, I think, fun for a day to, if the people, like, I do think there are actually people who really don't care what anybody thinks about them. And it would be kind of fun to go through life for a day to just
and
be
not,
one of
yeah.
those people, right? Who just like, I don't care. I'll just say whatever I want. And it
Mm,
doesn't matter to me if you like me or
mm,
whatever, because I don't care. I'm good.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And when you start writing your books, do you know how they're going to end at the start?
Yeah, I do.
Always?
I always know how it's
Yeah.
going to end. A couple of times it's ended in a slightly different place than I thought, or the motivation for why somebody did something evolves and becomes more complex. And sometimes very early in the process, I've said, oh, it's going to be this person. And then it's like, no, that's too obvious. It's not going to be that person. But yeah, I mean, before I start writing, I have to see the end. And like, even so, like, I'm writing, book 2 in the series, and in my Word document where I'm writing the first third of the book right now, but I literally have like the last scene as I see it right now in the book is their notes for that scene. And so I'm always writing to those things, and I'm writing to certain twists and reveals. And I need to see those beforehand. And then I spend the first third of my writing process really kind of working out who the other characters on the book are and how they all fit in, and like, why would they all, what motive do they all have for being the bad guy? Because I think that's part of the sleight of hand of these kinds of books, is that can have one obvious suspect. You have to be pointing the finger at a lot of different people. So.
And then it doesn't turn out to be the obvious one, and everyone's shocked.
Usually, no. I mean, it shouldn't. I guess it shouldn't is the point, right?
That's right. Yeah. And in your intro, I mentioned that you have had 2 of your books optioned for TV series. Is there any update on them at the moment? Any progress happening?
I mean, well, there's a writer's strike in Hollywood right now, so no specific updates. But yeah, one of them, I'll Never Tell, was fairly progressed in the sense of they've written a couple of scripts, and hopefully the writer's strike will end soon, and we'll get an update on that. And the other one is a little less advanced in that. And in my new series, it has also been optioned for television. I'm writing the pilot. And so I started, I signed that contract the day before the writer's strike. And so, so, which is, I mean, I agree with the strike, and, it's frustrating, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, it's summer. I'm going to enjoy myself and get back to work on these things when the strike is over. So, so hopefully that actually happens. It's, you never know with Hollywood. It's just be happy that people have a vision. Have a vision for my books as movies or television shows, and go from there.
And Sharon, who's watching, she wonders if you have much input into your covers.
They have to consult me about the cover. And so it really depends. And for the cover of Have You Seen Her, which I love, and I haven't always loved every cover of every one of my books because, it's just not possible. But I got 2 versions of this, and they were pretty similar. And it was very good right from the beginning. So it was choosing between 2 iterations. And then I think I made some suggestions about the font for the title, which was different in the original version that I saw. And then this version really was like the second version. But right away I was super excited when it's always very nerve-wracking as an author, because you get sent this email that's like, cover for whatever book. And then it's like they all share the exact same text. We're so excited to share the cover with you. We're really blah, blah, blah. And sometimes there's very different versions depending what publisher I've had. Sometimes there's 5, 6 versions. Sometimes there's 1, and then you kind of open it like this, like, and then sometimes I'm like, oh wow, that's amazing, and other times it's like, oh no, that's terrible. Let's start again. So it is always a nerve-wracking process, and I'm waiting right now to see the cover of next year's book, which hopefully we'll get in the next month or so. And it's like, that's not my job, is not designing covers, so I very rarely have like a very fixed idea of what something should look like. But like lots of things, I know what I like and I know what I don't like, and it's so hard to know.
Have you found though that if you haven't liked
sometimes there's sometimes books where I think the cover is horrendous and it's done super so and I'm not even talking about my own books. I just sometimes other people's books, you're and then other times it's like, oh, that cover's fantastic, and other people don't like it. So it is individual. But I do think it's cool. And like I have the Canadian version in my hand right now, and like this, the like cut is actually raised lettering. And Have You Seen Her is raised lettering. It's like, it's actually like tactile and cool, you know? So yeah.
No, it is a very cool cover. Are you
Yeah,
someone
it's a cool cover.
who chooses a book yourself sometimes by the cover only?
100%.
Yeah.
Of course. I think, I mean, everyone's different, but I think a lot of people are attracted by covers, at least to pick it up, you know? So, I mean, I've sat in lots of book salons and conferences and watched many, many, many people walk by, and it's like, what, you know, what makes them pick it up? It's always the cover that makes them pick it up, obviously. And then what do they do next? So it's like people pick it up, and then people have two main reactions. Mostly they turn it over in the back and they start reading like this. But, you know, you're sitting right there, so that's always a bit weird. And they're like this. And then sometimes they just put it down and walk away. I found that the more time somebody spends talking to me and thinking about it, the less likely they are to buy.
Oh, really?
Normally, normally if they're going to buy, they're just like, oh yeah, oh, this looks great. And they just pick it up, and it's like an impulse. It's very funny. And then some people do look inside, and they want to see, like, is there enough dialogue for them? Is it prose heavy? Or they'll start reading the first page, I find. But yeah, I don't let people like flip to the back if I'm sitting there. That's not okay. But
yeah, no, that's really interesting. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. It's been great talking to you again, and
thanks for having me.
Look forward to more of your books coming out, and hearing more about it in our group.
Stay tuned. Definitely.
Thank you, and thanks for those who joined in and asked questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.